Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, A Customer Love Story from Legacy Tape to Next Gen Data Protection with Rubrik and Nutanix AHV. Joining us as our speakers today, we are thrilled to have Geert Verbiest, Systems Engineer at Rubrik, Chris Papp, Solutions Marketing Manager at Nutanix, and Frederick Loest, Senior Technology Architect for PCCW Global. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I would like to remind everyone that we do like to keep these sessions as interactive as possible. If you have any questions or comments that come up during the webinar, please enter them into the Q&A box on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be saving time at the end to answer your questions live. In case we aren't able to get to your question live, we'll make sure to follow up with you after. This webinar is also being recorded, and you will be able to access the recorded version on demand. That about covers it. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Geert to get started.
Hi everyone, here's talking. Super excited to be here on this webinar with Chris and Frederick. This is our agenda for today, so we'll have a quick introduction to Rubrik. Next, we'll move on to Rubrik and the joint Nutanix solution and how they are great together. Chris will take you to a more deeper dive on Nutanix, and finally, Frederick will talk about these two technologies and how he uses them into PCCW Global, actually. With that, let's move on to the introduction of Rubrik. Let me take you back a couple of years, actually, back to the 90s, and let's have a look on how backup would look in those days. Not much has really changed since the 90s. We have large levels of complexity going on into our backup space, really. And if we look at how cloud and automation and security fits into those traditional technologies, well, they're simple, they're just not there. So we still are in this space where these components are single points of failure. We have all these different components which are difficult to manage. We have these media agents, we have replication components, catalog databases, and in most cases we have tape and offsite storage available. Any of those components could fail in a time period of 3 to 5 years. So fast forward to today and how Rubrik solves this problem. Well, Rubrik actually converges these backup software, this replication technologies, a catalog database, deduplicated storage, and more into a single software fabric that can be easily deployed as like a plug-and-play appliance, a software appliance, or even in the cloud. So it does not retain this complexity, this bloated architecture of legacy solutions. And it doesn't really matter where it's running. It might be on-premises, in your data center, or in the cloud. Now, Rubrik provides this single software platform to orchestrate the applications, data from data centers to cloud and the other way around. And it instantly powers any application anywhere for recovery purposes, search capabilities, cloud, test and dev, instantiation, and so on. Since Rubrik is also built with the scale-out architecture in mind, actually allows the users to continue managing that single system with scale-out capabilities. So that means that whenever you grow in any direction, there are no forklift upgrades going on, actually. Now, how does this actually work, that Rubrik solution? Well, there are a few pillars which are very, very important into that solution. First of all, it has to be an enterprise backup reimagined story, actually. So the backup space and the usability of that platform should be simple to use, simple to set up, should not be a hassle, should not be building these traditional architectures again. Of course, we protect all the most common enterprise applications, multiple hypervisors, physical workloads, and so on. So they are completely enterprise ready with instant recovery in mind, like live mount capabilities, but not only live mount capabilities towards virtual machines, but also towards Oracle, SQL databases, and so on, no matter if these are virtual machines or physical workloads. Now, for long-time retention, obviously, we are natively integrated into cloud for archival, which allows us to move data quickly into any of the most popular cloud providers for archival, but also enabling Google-like search in those data sets which we store at Rubrik and in the cloud, which enables us to easily do single file recovery from any of those different locations, being that on-premise or in cloud archives. Of course, the solution is built for security. It enables end-to-end encryption, encrypts the data at rest and in flight, and we build our custom file system which protects your data workloads against ransomware and all these kind of things because of the immutability of that file system. On top of that, we have AI and machine learning driven ransomware recovery to easily come back from any of those sorts of attacks. Now, if you look at how Nutanix and Rubrik coexist in that space, well, we all have the same vision. We have the same vision of simplicity, the scalability of the solution, the efficiency, and the performance of both platforms. So Nutanix does that from a primary compute and storage perspective, where Rubrik does the same for everything which is data protection and data management. In the end, moving to these hyper-converged solutions, of course, also results in a lower TCO, obviously, besides the simplicity and all the rest. Now, if we look at how the Acropolis hypervisor interacts with Rubrik and how we interact with the HHV platform, well, we actually end up in protecting workloads which are protected on HHV, and we do it in such a manner that we reach actually via policy automation, backup replication, and archival on the HHV hypervisor. Again, with the same simplicity and the no stress on workloads for end users whatsoever. The end result, of course, of all this hyper-converged goodness and the visions both companies have is that you actually end up with an on-premise cloud-capable solution where you actually automate every workload, any application on Nutanix, on the Acropolis hypervisor, and then move through Rubrik these applications to protect them and deliver data services on top of Nutanix. And whatever you do with these workloads afterwards, let it be for backup and recovery, disaster recovery, archival in cloud, compliancy testing, copy management, search, and analytics. This is what both worlds actually do, and how we have the similar vision actually. So with that, Chris, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you, Gert. Excited to be here and discuss with everybody how Nutanix and Rubrik work together. Kind of what Gert went over is Nutanix and Rubrik's evolved and were created based on the expectations of IT of what, based on their interaction with the cloud. And that led to, hyperconverged infrastructure and, in essence, HCI. And the reason for that, IT expectations where they needed to be able to deploy applications very quickly so that businesses were able to buy and use stuff as they got it in a fractional method. So instead of these large capital purchases that they used to have to pay for legacy 3-tier architecture, separate SAN, separate network, separate compute and virtualization, and then all the work put together to put it, they could just buy what they needed right now just for their current workloads, and then quickly deploy it out to market. And then as well as that, you needed to have the generalists be able to come in the IT infrastructure and deploy it very quickly like they would in the cloud, but on premises is, in fact, in essence, taking all the cloud benefits, putting it on premises, and then deploying it with ease of use. So, think of the same idea of using when you get a new iPhone or, a new Samsung phone. When you use that, you don't have to read through a giant documentation booklet, thousands of pages to figure out how to use it. It's just intuitive. And then we've taken that simplicity and put it into the product and rolled it out. And then kind of following with the same analogy of, with a phone, you just expect to get the new features with the new upgrades of software upgrades. And that's, software defined infrastructure in essence in HCI. You're taking that and then you're just, as a new feature is rolled out, you're getting that new feature functionality. And that's what it is in the cloud, and that's the way it is with Rubrik's and Nutanix as well. So you take that and new upgrade happens and you're able to get it out. And those are the expectations of IT, and those were the genesis for the creations of both our companies.
Chris, this is Fred speaking. If I may interrupt you, I'd like to mention that I see two very important items that were actually important drivers for us to move to Nutanix at PCCW Global. The rapid time to market is definitely an amazing characteristic of Nutanix. Everything is actually designed around that. In the legacy world, you need to build many different pieces to have your service ready. In the Nutanix world, everything is simple and fast, as you said. This is leading to the next item about the one-click simplicity. This is closely linked to the previous one, actually. One-click means light speed deployment with ultimate simplicity. And I really wanted to emphasize those ones. The two others on the right-hand side are, of course, also part of the Nutanix DNA without any doubt. So sorry for that interruption.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And do you find that with the simplicity that a lot of the low-hanging fruit and operational times that would eat up throughout your day and your team's day is kind of removed with having that simplicity and quick deployment, so you can focus on bigger projects and getting ahead of infrastructure problems altogether?
Absolutely.
Good. So kind of taking what with those concepts of how we got here to how do we get into HCI. On the left you see traditional app and virtualization layer on top of compute, and it's broken out to multiple storage fabrics. And so you're, in essence, as you're looking at this slide, you're looking at a bunch of silos there and a lot of specialties and a lot of just complexity altogether, that as it gets rolled out. We've taken that and just in an overall 50,000 foot level, we've compressed that all down into a single hyper-converged infrastructure. And then with that, you've deployed virtualization comes with that. So we are not a hardware appliance. What we are is software that you can get installed in an appliance from us, or you can use an OEM vendor of your choice. Roll it out so you get all the benefits of having an integrated, scaled out compute and storage. And then with that, like we merge that with a single point of view management. We call that Prism. And then with Prism, you're able to manage storage and all the benefits of that. So we also didn't come with, when we created this product, of just taking the same features and functionalities that you found in legacy. We looked at what the cloud was doing today. When you think of like Google computing centers or Amazon cloud, they've built their infrastructure from the ground up to serve, to basically hit that web scale scalability and web scale performance. So it just seems limitless. So whatever you need at that point in automation and performance and scale of capacity, you have. So think of it as like a Lego block. You just add one more block and you get all that computing and management and storage. And so you're able to quickly and easily scale out with no drop off, and then you're able to no drop in performance, I should say, and then you're able to actually predict what you'll need. So that's where it's easy to say, okay, with whatever workload that you put in the environment, I can get this much output from it, and only buy what you need at that point in time, instead of buying for workloads that aren't in your environment yet and taking these huge costs with that. So this is just a quick slide. I don't want to go through each of these, but I just wanted to point out, like, why is it so important? It seems like a very simple concept of having backup, but yet, what this kind of sums up is that, companies, as important as it is, they're still losing tons of money. In this slide, it's 1.7 trillion. And then when we talk to organizations and our customers, we're still saying that a lot of them are not confident in their disaster recovery. And that the data loss is continually going up. That this is 2012. Today it's 2019. And I guarantee you that it's continued to go up. And that's what we're seeing today. And it's just as important as something is. It needs to be at the front of your thought, in front of your minds, on why you need to merge production and secondary storage and disaster recovery and backup, and why it's so important. It should be a primary thought when moving forward in data center planning. And that's just that leads to what I'm showing here. These are just some examples of some very familiar companies. One day outage at Facebook is $11.7 million, and Amazon a 40-minute outage, you're looking at a revenue loss of 4.8. So real dollars associated to downtime. And as you walk through the years, you're seeing where partial unplanned outages or total unplanned outages equal to rising costs. And you see it going up over time as the average cost of a data center outage, the business impact goes up over time. And then when you look at this last slide, 2016, total unplanned outage is just under $1 million. So when we get to what we do and why we do it well, we have a full, kind of traditional, reason why we do this well is that traditional backup solutions force IT organizations to make compromises on their data protection needs, especially in a virtualized environment. In the absence of native data protection capabilities, customers typically use multiple products to meet SLAs. And as we saw in the previous slide, when you have multiple products, your data loss capabilities go up tremendously. I believe 3x or more. And that's because of the complexity. When we built Nutanix, we knew that complex environments create more work and longer deployment times. And the same is true with backups and just general high availability in your products and of your applications. And that's where Rubrik has come in to meet those. But it's really because a lot of those things are because of the silos that are created from those legacy architectures, and they weren't ever created, being cloud ready and with virtualization in mind. They were still in a very legacy architecture that compromised moving forward and scaling out in terms of meeting your SLAs and meeting those backup windows. So when you look at what we have robust DR and HA options, everything going, from, hours and minutes to near zero. And that includes, different types of replication, internal snapshots, and the replication is broken up between async and metrosync, which we'll get into, which is our asynchronous and synchronous replication. And it's basically support throughout the entire platform. But one of the key things that we're proud of in terms of a partnership is that we have full third-party support for long-time archival backups, for compliance, for in Rubrik's case also as well. It's much more than just data protection. It's those data management and being able to go out and plug into quick replication times and restoring out to the cloud and on from a single point of glass. So now your backup infrastructure plugs right into our APIs, and it's quick and efficient and simplicity. Same pillars that we were built off of. So our asynchronous replication is when you're looking at it's based on a policy-based replication by VM. It's as I said, it's asynchronous. It's multi-site replication. You're looking at RTO of minutes and RPO of minutes at this point. So if you had an outage, and this is this is what a lot of our customers use that aren't using a third party. It's built into the product. You can centralize all that management from a central point of view, which is Prism. Again, the one-click simplicity of using that, and you can schedule things. You schedule your policies within that. So a single pane of glass for all your management and replication. And then for our synchronous Nutanix Metro availability, this is you have some requirements for this to do synchronous on Nutanix. It's a 5 millisecond RTT, so it needs to be very close. What we see with our customers on campuses that they have very large campuses where they're going across, and they have a fast connection. So you're having real-time copies across 2 data centers. And then that's where we see a lot of this use case at. Again, it's still the centralized management on Prism, but in this case, you're going to have like near zero RTO, and your RPO will be 0. And this is more of an active standby scenario where it's a complete basic clone, so you're not having any data loss in case of a site failure. And this is where we lead into one of our valued customers that has taken Rubrik's and Nutanix HV, which is our hypervisor platform, and built it out and had a great response. Frederick, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. So first, let me give you some insights about our company, so you know the background of what we're talking about. So PCCW Global is a leading telecommunication provider offering the latest voice and data solution to multinational enterprises and communication service providers. Our headquarters are established in Hong Kong and covers more than 3,000 cities and 150 countries, and support portfolio of integrated global communication solution. Our IT is actually spread over 3 strategic data centers located in US, in Europe, and in Asia. Before the big switch to hyper-converged technologies, PCCW Global was using a lot of different legacy technologies that were leading to complex and intensive management and administration tasks. Not everything was actually virtualized, and system recovery was very, very complicated, and even sometimes not applicable. The team resources constraint limits our capacity to add new services, and our RPOs were too long and not practical using legacy platforms. On top of those old style considerations, we were lacking of resources to manage our IT. We had to find a way to simplify it. Nutanix was solving this problem and appeared to be a real solution. It brings simplicity and efficiency, as Chris just described before, into our data center and drastically decrease our administrative payload. A single staff member can easily operate multiple data centers with simple UI. And it really is to create complex environment with the power of the one-click philosophy that we described before. Nutanix can deal with backup. That's the big question. Using a feature called the protection domains. But this is definitely not the thing to do because you are doing backup on the same physical environment and then adding a single point of failure. You may also use distant cluster if you want for the replication, but then you are consuming costly storage. Nutanix is definitely not intended to act as a storage repository. Well, at least not in my views. Maybe Chris, you can tell us more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So, a lot of times when our customers work in kind of the rule of 3, so you can definitely back up to the same storage, but in the rules of 3, just in making sure that you have your data available. If you take an outage on your primary infrastructure and it goes out, then you've also lost your backups. And then that's why it's good to have it go to, in this case, like a Rubrik solution. But also in case there's different use cases, data protection is key, but there's also compliance and ease of using that data out, managing it, and indexing it and keeping it for long term, and then easily getting it back. Some people also, in case you're going to send it to the cloud and if you're going to send it to tape and then to secondary storage, you have multiple areas that you can get that from for different tiers of data. And that's a lot of what our reasons why it's necessary to have a partner like Rubrik to have that and deploy that out. So yes, you can put it on a Nutanix platform today, but you also want that copies of that data in another location.
Absolutely, and this is why we had to look at something else. I discovered Rubrik early 2016, and it was already a very innovative solution, but only supporting VMware at that time. And I told Rubrik to come back to me when Nutanix AHV will be supported. And guess what? They did. I had the opportunity to test a physical cluster running an early release code supporting Nutanix AHV. And the POC was a great success. And we deployed the first cluster early 2018. What makes Rubrik different is the way it manages backups. It is all SLA driven, no backup jobs anymore, no complex schedules to manage. You just specify how many backups you want per day, per week, month, year, and how many you want to keep into the box. In short, SLAs are based on frequency and retention, and this is really helping when operating in a large environment, when scheduling is tight in around-the-clock deployment. Using SLAs offload the scheduling complexity out of the platform. The adaptive backup feature prevents the backup jobs to have a big impact on the performance in your apps. Indeed, you can tweak in what circumstances the backup won't happen. If there's too much load on the VMs or too high latency on your storage and or network, the backup will be postponed and automatically rescheduled. Another great benefit of the solution is the fact that it is actually a turnkey solution. Other backup vendors are only selling software and then you buy your own. It means that you still have to provide compute and storage in any case. In Rubrik's case, you do not only have the software, you also have the associated storage to store the backups. And lastly, but this one has been discovered on the field. Well, it's not a real driver. It is the light speed deployment, and it is really impressive. No need to plan for days of deployment with complex procedure, with robot plans or whatsoever. Good to take into consideration, especially when you're planning to have more than one site with big deployments. So lessons learned. The way we were operating previously prevented us to do regular and efficient restore tests to validate our backups. Indeed, restoring is always a stressful situation and the outcome is not always guaranteed. If you are lucky, the tape is still on site. If not, you need to contract your vaulting company to get them back. Once the tape is located, you probably will need to reconstruct the tape catalog to get access to the data. Then the data can eventually get restored if the tape is still in good condition, of course. So the data got restored. All this probably for a 10 meg file. It can take hours to get the file back. Now with Rubrik, this is a completely different story. You have the ability to search for an object in the UI, locate the VM you are looking for, then search and each and every snapshots, and they are all browsable directly without doing any restore. In a few clicks, you have what you are looking for. Deployment. What we have noticed on the field is, as I already said before, an incredibly fast and smooth deployment. It is probably longer to physically rack the equipment in the rack than setting it up. So being ready in 30 minutes is real measurement. I've heard from other customers that some proof of concept have been deployed in less than 20 minutes. About our current status, so we have deployed the first cluster in Europe early 2018, immediately followed by Asia, and US will be up and running very, very soon. We also have some virtual deployment for testing purpose and used in remote and branch offices. So what we love amongst all those features. On the storage topic, you have all the modern goodnesses, deduplication, compression, erasure coding, whatever. Here in the screenshot on the left-hand side, this is from my Edge, the virtual appliance. I'm using it for my test, and as you can see, I have more than 6,000 snapshots on this virtual brick, and the reduction on the storage is above 75%. On the right-hand side, this one is one of our physical cluster with an amazing data reduction. We have numbers above 86%. It shows how Rubrik is strong in terms of storage optimization. We haven't talked about that yet, by the way, but Rubrik is based around snapshots, and those snapshots are transferred from the hypervisor to the Rubrik cluster. Each time a new snapshot is done, it is incremental based on the last one found in the brick. They are calling this the incremental forever. And then the reference is always the latest snapshot. In short, when you need to find data that have not changed for a long time, there is no need to look for all the previous subsets of data because it's already in the last set. Maybe Gert, you can probably provide more detail about this or correct my views.
No, you're absolutely correct, Frederick, and I'm really happy you're like the data reduction we are able to achieve on the Rubrik platform, and it's kind of a logic consequence of how the solution was built. If you build a solution from scratch and you actually look at what backup data really is and what should be achieved with backup data, what you should not do, obviously, is just take off-the-shelf tooling or off-the-shelf file systems. So at Rubrik, from day one, we looked at that data and we imagined ourselves what is important, what should we be able to do and with that data. And one of the things we concluded was that it has to be storage efficient, it has to be fast, it has to be smart, and we need to, have a way to make it searchable by using metadata in this distributed architecture. So we build our own file system, which is called Atlas, and that file system allows you to, be hassle-free. In a more traditional world, you would, as you mentioned in your previous slides, you would probably decide on how you should schedule and then define a policy on what storage box it should land, making you think about deduplication and what you want with that data set. In a Rubrik environment, everything is coming from that intelligent layer from within our file system. So that's the single, full, and incremental forever principle, which is actually our file system optimized to do without any performance loss, which actually brings you to the point you also mentioned that whatever you do, whenever you use metadata to locate files or objects on our file system, well, they're immediately there because you can constantly consolidate that incremental with the initial full to whatever stress situation you encounter and you need to immediately recover. The data is just there for you to recover. So it's built from day one, from scratch, just with these capabilities in mind. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for clarifying. On the topic of simplicity, the screenshot at the bottom of this slide is actually showing the single file recovery functionality. The ability to recover a single file from a specific backup is indeed a great feature. Based on that, you have the option to either download the file, overwrite onto the original, or restore elsewhere with a different name. And this is very powerful and useful. Next thing that we love is the API-driven access to the cluster. So you can easily enhance or automate anything backup or disaster recovery related actions. Based on API calls, we've been able to create two functions that does not exist out of the box. The first one is called, the first one is a centralized dashboard that displays key information for all our clusters on a single pane of glass. We are calling this Rubrik Central to mimic a little bit what Nutanix is doing with Prism Central, because it has the same philosophy. This is quite simple. This is a very simple PHP file who does all the API calls and report the requested information on a simple HTML file. It is very useful, and we love that. The second one is an automated MS SQL sync to another MS SQL instance for disaster recovery purpose. It actually syncs the production DB to a sandboxing environment each and every 30 minutes to have a standby ready DR site in case of problem on the main side occurs. The last point on this list is the Rubrik support, and the support is really, really fabulous. This is part of those companies like Nutanix who are hiring people with a very wide industry knowledge. The advantage for the customer is the fact that you don't need to play ping pong with various specialists from VMware, MS SQL, Windows, Linux, AWS, whatever. No, you have one and only one contact who serves all you need, speed and simplicity. About the future. So what will be our future with Rubrik? One of the most important topic is most probably the archiving. So with time, the Rubrik cluster storage is filling in and becomes full, and adding new nodes is most of the time the best option. But another option is configure an archiving target to move old backups to another location. This can be done on-prem or in the cloud, depending on your policies. At the same time, you're controlling your cost and the Rubrik TCO. Another great feature is replication between clusters. So this is how you can eliminate tapes once for all. Indeed, our policies impose us to have offsite backups, and since few months, the only way to do this was using removable storage. Now we can backup in data center A and replicate in data center B to have two copies of the same dataset on a different physical location. Moving to cloud. This is a hot topic, obviously, and we're looking at it. Once in the cloud, we can make good use of the Rubrik product called Polaris, who's providing a central management console. And when the workloads are in the cloud, we still need to backup them, and Rubrik can backup cloud workloads to cloud repositories. So this is my conclusion.
All right. Thank you to our speakers for a great presentation today. We did actually have a few questions come through during the webinar. Some of them I believe we already addressed, but there are a few that we'll hit again just to be thorough. And as a reminder, please be sure to type any questions into the question box of your control panel, and we will do our best to address them live. So one of the first questions that came in is actually for Fred. Frederic, how has Rubrik changed the way you are protecting data?
Well, I would say that now we have the assurance that we can restore our data, which sounds maybe silly, but the fact that backups are browsable now is bringing, let's say, a big improvement to ensure that we are safe. In case we have a doubt, we can download the needed files or mount a database in the sandboxing environment, as I explained a few minutes ago. So from that point of view, how Rubrik changed the way we protect the data is we are on the safe side.
Great, thank you. And then we have a question for Chris. If Nutanix has HA and DR, why do you need third-party backup?
So that's a common question, and a lot of it ties down to the workload. So and how long you're keeping the data. Third-party backup that I see a lot where people absolutely need it comes to getting application consistency and restoring to a point in time, not just from like a snapshot view or recovering a whole environment or VM, but if they're trying to recover something from an Oracle or a SQL server, or bring something up that was in their in their accounting application system. So they're going in and they're getting those consistent snapshots, consistent backups, and they're able to get that and roll it over from an incremental update, and also be able to index that and bring it up. You know, whether that's from a failure or bad data, or they need it for a compliance or legal issue, they're able to get it from that point in time and quickly grab it and bring it back. Whereas like where our system is there, we have data protection in the environment. So if you have a failure of a node, we're able to bring up that you know, without any data loss, or we have snapshots for short point in time, jumping back and forth, and you have unlimited, especially on AHV. But if you really want to go back and grab something from a point in time, that you can just put right back into like a table, or restore that application to that point in time. That's where it becomes very valuable to have a third party.
Perfect, thank you. And then our next question is for Geert. What workloads does Rubrik support?
So, like mentioned in the presentation, we started, and also like Fred mentioned, we started our protection of vSphere VMware workloads initially a couple of years ago. Obviously, customers of us want to protect the whole data sets, including HHV, where Frederick was waiting for. So we actually delivered today all common applications going from hypervisors, vCloud Director, physical workloads, they let it be SQL on physical, failover clusters, always on, Oracle, SAP, and so on and so on. And through Rados.io, we also support, for example, NoSQL database like Mongo, Cassandra, all these kind of things. That's what we can do today.
Great, thank you. And then a quick follow-up question to that. Do you require agents to back up specific applications like SQL, for example?
Yeah, so some applications, we need to do additional things like, for example, log truncation and all those kind of things. So we have multiple methods of backing up these workloads. So that might be like through VMware tools, through the VSS providers, which we wrote our own initiator, by the way, to be more efficient. But for some applications like Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, for that matter, we require something which we prefer to call a connector, because it's more lightweight than an agent. It updates automatically. It has certificate-based authentication and so on. So for these applications, we require a connector. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question for Fred. Fred, how do you check that your data is backed up?
Well, again, with Rubrik, there's no really surprises. Backup are done in due time, but it's more marketing. Okay, so to go on the real side of things, we are making a good use of the reporting modules. We haven't mentioned that there is a very powerful reporting modules, and if any SLA is sort of compliance for whatever reason, then we know immediately, and then we can either decrease the frequency or do some fine tuning. So we have, I would say, a daily report, and in the UI, you can see immediately if something is wrong. But if you don't want to log into the UI, then you still have your reports delivered by mail, or whatever kind of delivery you like.
Perfect, thank you. And then a quick follow-up to that for you, Fred. What is the feature that you like the most about Rubrik?
Well, as I said during the slides, the SLA are definitely a revolutionary way of managing backups. So you don't need to think, when am I going to start the backup? The only thing you need to have in mind is frequency and retention, as I mentioned before. So the Rubrik software itself will manage everything for you.
Perfect. All right, another question for Geert that came in. How does Rubrik verify the integrity of its backups over time, the full and all incremental backups together?
Okay, that's a good one, actually. Yeah, we've been hearing the stories that full incrementals over the years have been a bad idea, and for a good reason. Doing one full and incremental after that might run you into problems if you have an issue during the incremental chain, obviously. Now, if you take the design principle of what Rubrik did in terms of file system and our upper lying layer called Cerebro, the system was actually built to handle this kind of inconveniences we had in traditional architecture. So the Atlas file system, in conjunction with our intelligence layer called Cerebro, is actually constantly reversing snapshot change, making sure we have these files ready for you, and at the same time doing error checking on the fools with the incrementals that come after that. In worst case scenario, if there would be an issue with the incremental chain behind the full that we initially did, we will fire off a full. So in a rare condition that we have an issue, we cannot verify the backup, a full will be relaunched and we will restart the process and consolidate the rest of the snapshots.
All right, thanks. And then another related question for you, Geert. Given that there are incremental updates that would be lost, what would be lost or recoverable over what time?
Yeah, that's actually more or less the same question. Well, at least it will be the same answer. We will do it immediately. There's a constant checking going on of these incremental updates. Under the hood, we can even do live mounts to check if the machine actually is capable of running. And in case of any other issue that we would encounter where we cannot guarantee like that full being ready when you need it, we will shoot another full just to be sure. But just to be on the same page, that's extremely rare. So we need to have like this kind of corruption going on, power failures, or this kind of thing. So it doesn't happen that often, to be honest.
All right. We have two more questions for Chris. The first one is, what are the different types of data protection available in Nutanix?
So within data protection for Nutanix, we have snapshots. We have data locality. So in other words, if we don't have the concept of RAID in Nutanix, what we do is in a storage fabric, we keep copies of the data local to where the VM sits, and then we keep metadata on other servers. And so if you have a failure, it can quickly rebuild in a fraction of time that a normal RAID set could rebuild, and it brings it up on another, wherever that VM comes up on another server. And then with that, you get the benefits of the compression deduplication, and that's our data protection on the actual server itself, on the actual, host itself.
Perfect, thank you. And then last question that came through, what are the different types of HA native to Nutanix?
So we have async replication, and we have our metrosync, which is a synchronous replication. We also have a replication that came out more recently that's called near-sync, which it's an async replication, but instead of being in 15-minute increments, it's using our snapshotting technology for HV, and it's in 1-minute increments. So much quicker increments. It's closer, less data loss. It's closer to that synchronous replication without taking on the full synchronous workload, and you don't have the 5 millisecond requirement of being a 5 millisecond requirement for across the WAN or between your data centers.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you everybody for joining us today. If we did not get to your question during our live session, we'll be sure to follow up with you later today. We hope to see you on another webinar with Rubrik soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.